Motor development is a lifelong process of one's motor ability and behavior. The mountain of motor development is a metaphor described by Jane Clark, symbolizing climbing a mountain as a journey from basic coordinative actions to skillful movements. The person climbing the mountain develops through constraints. Carl Newell discussed constraints in his article, which is Constraints on the Development of Coordination. Newell stated that there are three types of constraints: organism, environmental, and task. Constraints can be defined as anything that applies rules or limitations to the individual. They can come in the form of three categories: organism, task, and environmental. Lastly, they can develop at different times in one's life, or they can be defined by laws of physics.
The first stage of the mountain of motor development is the reflexive period. This stage starts prior to birth, while the fetus is still in the mother's womb. During this stage, the infant shows only reflexive and spontaneous movements. Reflexive movements can be described as movement elicited by a specific stimuli and have a specific response. These responses are involuntary. An example of this is the palmar grasp reflex. The stimulus is the object being placed in the infant's hand. The reflex is the infant grasping the object. A spontaneous movement is one that has no known stimuli to elicit movement, and there is no clear goal of the movement. Both of these actions provide the infant with a means to interact with the world as well as ensure its survival in the beginnings of its life. The constraints in this period are primarily organism. As the infant crawls up the mountain of the reflexive stage, he reaches the pre-adapted period, where the infant can make goal-oriented movements. The onset of this period is 2 weeks of age. In this period, the child has purpose to their movements, such as moving one's arms to reach for an object. While doing so, the infant will learn to navigate its hands and limbs to get a specific object. The child will learn coordination through various activities, and the end result will be self-feeding, which is skillful reaching with a pincer grip, and self-locomotion walking. The main constraints of this period are primarily organism constraints, because the outside environment does not have such a big role and the infant is still developing their coordination and adapting to the world. Their biggest constraints will be within their own bodies mostly. One exception, though, is that the infant will deal with one relentless environmental constraint: gravity. With their bodies not optimal for complex movements due to the inverted pendulum structure, they must deal with the effect of gravity on their unsound bodies. Next, the child enters the fundamental motor pattern stage. This stage lasts from 1 to about 7 years. The child is showing signs of gross motor skills and is now learning basic movements. Common examples of these gross motor skills are running, jumping, skipping, and object deflection. With a firm grasp on these basic skills, the child will develop into more skillful and precise movements. This stage provides a base camp for the individual. They always return to this stage when attempting to learn a new task or skill. They will use the knowledge and movements they already knew how to develop, whatever skill they are looking for to achieve. It is important to note here that the gender differences can be a little more clearly. For instance, boys will play and be more competitive, individualized and egocentric, opposed to girls who play in a sharing, cooperative manner. Upon interacting with each other, both genders will maintain their culturally constrained behavior with one another. This is expressed in detail in Clarcita Garcia's study, Gender Differences in Young Children, Interactions when Learning Fundamental Motor Skills.
Once the individual is able to combine fundamental motor patterns into one movement, they've reached the context-specific period. If the individual is not able to combine fundamental motor patterns, they have hit the proficiency barrier and need to work on combining their basic motor patterns. Environmental constraints play a big role in this period because the context-specific movements one develops is strongly based off their surroundings and what they're being pushed towards. This is a stage where skills developed becomes goal-oriented. In this period, the person is able to base their movements in order to perform a task, such as hitting a volleyball or kicking a soccer ball. The peak of the mountain is a skillful period. In this period, the individual's motor skills have reached optimal levels of efficiency, both mechanical and psychological, and are considered to be skillful. An example of this would be serving a volleyball. If anywhere on the mountain an individual cannot fully perform their skillful or optimal movement due to an injury or old age, they are considered to be in the compensation period. During this period, the individual returns to the base camp at the fundamental motor pattern stage. The person must find a way to adjust their motor patterns to deal with the problem they are facing, or they must work their way back up the mountain to find the next more efficient way to perform a task. An example of this would be a person who hurts their leg, so they must adjust their serve in order to get the ball across the net.
The mountain of motor development, described by Jane Clark, has 6 stages: the reflexive period, period after period, fundamental motor patterns period, context-specific period, skillful period, and lastly the compensation period.
Each period has its own special attributes that help with the development of the motor patterns experienced by the child, played by me, into Andrew, who has grown into a skilled volleyball player. We just want to give a special shout out to a few people that helped us. One, Jared, for helping us film.
Ani for helping us with props, specifically her water bottle, and Dennis for video bombing. Thank you.